I'm Dr. Shola Mos-Shogbamimu. I'm a lawyer, author, political women's rights activist. Now, we have to look at the legacy of slavery and the ongoing use of white supremacy as a mindset to understand how racism permeates our society today. It's deeply rooted in history and it continues as a vicious cycle because for certain people, their way of life is predicated on the denial of an equal value of life to Black people and ethnic minorities. The International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination is absolutely what I am passionate about. It is not a one-day event. It has to be an ongoing, actively anti-racist mission that each one of us must decide that we want to be a part of. And I think the day itself allows us to come together, those who truly want to pioneer a different way of doing things, those who are not afraid to have real hard conversations about what the solutions must be. It is a day where we can use that to start to break down the eradication of white supremacy. It is so important to eradicate white supremacy and all of the divisive rhetoric, all of the dehumanization of the Black identity, which I talk about in my book, This Is Why I Resist. So being actively anti-racist is being consciously intentional of what racism is, how it manifests in the mindset of society, what it looks like, the impact that it has, on the lives of Black people and ethnic minorities. So it is an evolving conversation, an evolving, I suppose, a demonstration that we must all be part of. I would say that people, aside from being consciously intentional, I need you to educate yourself in understanding all of the different nuances of intersecting inequalities. I need you to be bold enough to use your privilege, whatever that privilege might be it white privilege, be it your privilege as heterosexual, because we know, because we know that society, the default setting for society is heterosexual, it's Christian, it is male, it is pale and stale. And if you know what I mean by those, it's certain people, you have to be male, you have to be a certain age. It means that when you are part of that default setting, you have privilege to ensure that those who are not like you are not, denied an equal value of life and liberty. So I want you to have that boldness, the courage of your conviction, to be able to say what needs to be said, to be able to do what needs to be done. And sometimes you can be the Rosa Parks of your world. It's not about shouting out about someone. Just don't get up if they're demanding that you get up. You know what I mean? And start a whole new revolution. That, for me, is being actively anti-racist. And you also need to understand that being actively anti-racist also means you coming into your own. You need to understand how you, as an influencer, because we all are, each one of us is an influencer. How do you influence change in your dining room, in your schools, in your workplace, on the high street? When you elect future leaders, how do you influence change? That is being actively anti-racist. What it feels like to experience racism, it's not something I can give you one answer to, because there are different layers of nuances to racism. But what you must understand is that the way racism works is that it's a power construct in which economically, politically, and socially, an equal value of life and liberty is denied to Black people and ethnic minorities. It is the way it permeates in society. It works at a macro level and at a micro level, so that even individuals who are racist have a power construct that supports them. I'll give you an example. The example of Amy Cooper in New York, who called the police on Christian Cooper, they're not related, African American Christian Cooper. She did that knowing that using the words African American, Black, would trigger the kind of response that could put his life in danger. Now, understand that Black people don't have that kind of power over white people. It doesn't work that way, right? So racism and the discrimination that is experienced from it, the kind of hate and bigotry that comes from it. It's not just about people not liking you because you're black. It is so much more about superiority of race versus inferiority of race. So racism sees the white skin as superior to the black skin. And it has been, and the way it has worked is that black skin has been dehumanized for that purpose. And you need to, for you to truly understand what that means, it does mean understanding the history of white supremacy, the history of slavery, and how that manifests itself today. The rule of law in itself as a concept is a great thing. It simply says that, the law and the sets of rules that we have in a society must be abide by, that nobody's above the law. That's great, right? But we know that's not what works in society. We know that society, especially with the rich class system, the rich get away with stuff that the poor can't. Those who have different kinds of power get away with what those with less power can't. And that also manifests itself when it comes to the social construct of race, okay? But understand that it's not about rule of law, it's about specific legislation. So do we have specific legislation, for instance, in the United Kingdom or in the United States that addresses things like, race discrimination? Of course we do. But then why is it that race is still an issue? It means that the laws are not applied or interpreted to really drive change. That is what it means. And it also means that when we see examples of it, when people talk about workplace discrimination, hair discrimination, for instance, when we look at the broken criminal justice system that seems to apply disproportionately against black people versus white people, you see that racism, that mindset is absolutely just seeped into society. It's systemic. Right, that's why it can permeate, and people sometimes don't understand, well, does that mean I'm racist? I think we need to understand that it's not just about a label, it's about impact, okay? So when it comes to law, we should be looking at legislation, we should be looking at how it's interpreted and how it's applied. What is the point of having laws that when it's applied, it favors some people over others? And that is what happens with some of our legislation. That's the impact that we see, even though the legislation was put in there following civil rights movements in the United Kingdom and in the United States and some other countries that also have a legacy rooted in slavery. So this is why I resist. This is why I resist. And it addresses this ongoing hard conversations we have about race, racism, and race inclusion. It disabuses the reader of any notion that talking about racism and race inclusion should be comfortable. Why in God's name should it be comfortable when racism is not comfortable? It definitely speaks to those who continue to deny that systemic racism is an issue. It speaks to those who are willfully ignorant about racism. This book, it's not the sugar-coated or let me have a cup of tea. It's about to make you feel comfortable if you're ready to be challenged and enter into thought-provoking conversations. I want people to pick up my book and know that they're having a conversation with me. The reason why literature is important, right, is because some people like to read, and I'm hoping that by reading, it gives and they're able to glean information that they do not ordinarily have, in case you don't have people close to you that you can speak to. But understand that, of course, there are other books that you can read as well. So don't just read one, read more. But I also need you to understand this. As a black anti-racist feminist, it was important for me to really address a lot of issues. And what I do with this book is I respond to the ongoing conversations happening on social media with the mainstream headlines, with divisive political rhetoric. I'm using contemporary examples to deconstruct the nuances, the lies, the misinformation, because I personally don't have time for them. And this book ends on a powerful question. The question is, when will white people progress? That's right. Not the kumbaya moment of, we will overcome. Oh, please. That was like decades ago before I was born. Listen to me. We need our white siblings to be up, ready to use all that they are to say, you know what? Enough is enough. We need to eradicate white supremacy. We need to eradicate racial inequality and injustice. We need to understand better what is going on. That's what this book does. It's time to stop the white fragility, the white fatigue, the white ingratitude, the white, well, you know what, I've just shown you my black square and I'm so supportive. We don't need your performative allyship. It's so important. This book talks about it. Racism is also white people's problem, not just black people, okay? So it's going to take all of us to bring an end to it. And let me close up with this. And my book talks about the fact that it is important to understand, and the fact that I even need to stress this point, not all white people are racist. That is not what this book is about. Not all white people are racist. But racism exists. It's a power construct created, a social power construct created by white nations to benefit white people. So it's going to take those with the influence and the power, those who understand why this exists, to say, I don't want any part of that. And they have to be actively ready to do that. So it is for black people to read, people of other ethnic minorities, and white folks as well. And let me just end with this. Please know that we have had white allies from time immemorial, some of whom have lost their lives and liberty in the fight for equality and justice. They were there too. They were just lone voices in a system that wanted to profit from dehumanizing black people. So I'm saying to my white siblings, it's time for you to roll up your sleeves, right, and be part of the cause. Because the ethos of Black Lives Matter is that this is not a hotel you can check in and check out of. We are in it 365 days, 24/7. So you're either with us, or you might as well just pack yourself to another lane.